Would you like to pay with cash or with a credit card? Some retailers won't accept your preference, but it might surprise you which one it is. Welcome to Plain English, a recipe for success, the best podcast for learning English through current events. I'm Jeff. JR is the producer, and you're listening to episode 152. And that means you can find the free interactive transcripts of this episode online at plainenglish.com/152. Coming up on today's episode, the trend toward cashless stores and even cashless societies. Retailers say it lowers their costs, improves speed at the counter, and even helps with employee safety. But others say it discriminates against those who don't have access to credit. We'll explore both sides of the question on today's episode. We'll also review the phrase to point to something when making an argument. Our quote of the week, since it's Monday, will focus on personal meditation. Before we start, though, I want to highlight our partner, Audible. With Audible, you can browse thousands of audiobooks in English or in your own language, and even try one for free with a 30-day trial membership. Learn more at plainenglish.com/book. How many times have you been caught without any cash and you've tried to pay with a credit card only to find that the merchant either doesn't accept credit cards or has a minimum purchase? It's happened to most of us, right? But did you know that the opposite is happening too? Some customers want to pay with cash, but the retailers only accept credit cards. In fact, just last week, I went out to lunch across the river from my office in downtown Chicago to a restaurant called Brown Bag Seafood, and I saw a sign on the door saying, "Credit cards only." It's part of a growing trend, especially in larger cities. Shops and restaurants point to a number of advantages. The first is speed. Cash transactions slow down the line as customers search to find the right bills and coins, and as the cashier counts and delivers the change. There's also a lower risk of theft. If it's generally known that you don't have cash in the register, then your store won't be a target for petty criminals. Businesses that handle cash also have to deposit it in the bank, and some employees might not feel safe leaving the store with a lot of cash to take to the bank. There's also the cost in terms of time. I've worked at several retail businesses in my lifetime, so I know how much time and effort goes into managing cash at a shop or restaurant. You have to count and recount the cash. Each person has his or her own drawer or register to reconcile at the beginning and the end of every shift. All that time, both for people working for the register and for the managers, all that time is time not spent serving customers. But before a store goes completely cashless, the owners should consider a few potential downsides. The first is simply that with cash, you get the money right away. There's no need to wait for the funds to clear. But the biggest pitfall is the inconvenience to customers who do prefer to pay in cash. A lot of people, as a matter of managing their personal budget, prefer to make day-to-day expenditures with paper and coins. There are even studies that show you spend less if you have to see the bills leave your hand rather than just swipe a card. Others might have gotten into problems with credit cards in the past, so they prefer to spend only what they have in cash. We have to recognize, too, that even in the most developed economies, there are people who simply don't have access to credit. That could be a teenager who doesn't have a bank account yet, people with very little who can't qualify for a credit card, non-citizens who aren't eligible for local bank accounts, or people of more modest means who just exist on cash alone. About 6% of American households don't have a bank account, and I suspect it might be higher in some other countries. In the US, it's also common for restaurant workers to make most of their money in cash tips, so they tend to spend a lot in cash rather than with credit or debit cards. The elderly and rural families are also less likely to want to pay with credit or debit cards. There are people who think it's just unfair to those who have dollar bills and can't use them. A city councilman in Philadelphia said it's unfair that he can buy a coffee with a credit card, but someone in line behind him with legal United States currency would not be allowed to buy the same coffee. Philadelphia became the first city in the U.S. to ban cashless stores. Starting July 1st, any store in Philadelphia that refuses to accept cash can be fined $2,000. A study in December said that 29% of American adults don't make any purchases in cash in a typical week. Higher income people are much more likely to use credit and debit cards than lower income people. So let's flip that around. That same statistic means that 70% of adults do make at least one purchase in cash in a typical week, and I am among the 70%, even though I rarely insist on using cash. However, check out this fact. In Sweden, only 13% of adults reported having used cash for a recent purchase. Going cashless is rapidly becoming the norm in Sweden, where most transactions are with credit cards or payment apps, including one called Swish. Public restrooms often only accept credit cards, as do many shops and restaurants. So I can understand restaurants, public transit, and retail shops accepting only credit cards. But you won't believe what other kind of business in Sweden is going cashless. Banks. You heard that right. The majority of local bank branches in Sweden don't let people deposit cash or take out cash. What is a bank if not a place to deposit or take out money? The thing is, with so much economic activity taking place electronically, many bank branches decided, just like shops and restaurants, that they don't need to handle hard currency any longer either. China is also a leader in cashless transactions, but they skipped the whole wave of debit and credit cards and jumped straight to online payment wallets. The ubiquitous apps WeChat and Alipay let consumers book taxis, pay bills, buy produce in a market, and handle most routine transactions with businesses. It's also popular to send money to friends in so-called peer-to-peer payments with online payment wallets in China. And that's in the first country to introduce paper bills as a currency to the world. Today I have to say hello to Megumi from Japan. She was the first Japanese listener to send me a voice message on WhatsApp. I think a lot of Japanese listeners are pretty reserved, but Megumi sent me a great message. She said she thought the new era name in Japan, Reiwa, was a little too simple at first, but she's coming around to it, and she's gotten used to the new name, even if she can't believe the Heisei era is ending. She also mentioned that the new emperor learned English, and Megumi is optimistic that he will make Japan more global in the future. That's great that he knows English, and if any of you have a personal connection to the emperor, please tell him about plain English. Thanks for your message, Megumi, and for all the rest of you out there, I'll give the WhatsApp number at the end of the episode. I also want to say hi to Vanessa from Belo Horizonte in Brazil. Have you tried an audiobook yet? I'm still working on Where'd You Go, Bernadette in Spanish. I was at dinner with friends yesterday, and 2 other people had actually read that book. It'll be a movie soon, and JR and I both really like it. It's available on Audible, a great way to listen to books, whether in your own language or in English. You can find out more at plainenglish.com/book, B-O-O-K. And once you get the free trial and the app, you can download a free audiobook to keep forever. And in the app, you can slow down the speech if you like. I would recommend 75% speed if you're having trouble at full speed. We are really lucky to have so many language resources available in this day and age. plainenglish.com/book, B-O-O-K. A recipe for success. Thanks for joining us at Plain English this Monday morning. Today, the expression I'd like to share with you is to point to. This is a phrase that you can use when making an argument or describing an argument that someone else is making. The more literal meaning is to indicate something with your finger. That's to point to something. But in a discussion or an argument, when you point to something, you are highlighting it in your speech. Here's how you first heard it. Why are shops and restaurants going cashless? The retailers point to the added convenience and lower cost. These are the supporting examples that they used for their argument, for their opinion. When asked, what are the advantages? They point to greater convenience and lower cost. But what about opponents of cashless stores, like that city council in Philadelphia? Well, they point to how unfair it is to people who don't have credit cards. I would point to how unfair it is to people who just want to use cash instead of credit cards. But I also think that's for the stores and the customers to figure out for themselves. Do you remember our episode about Notre Dame Cathedral? The business community stepped up to raise a lot of money for its reconstruction, but not everyone thought this was a good thing, specifically the yellow vest protesters. They point to the fact that big businesses can raise money for Notre Dame, but not to help the struggling French middle class. One more example. Back in episode 137, we talked about the second patient ever to be cured of HIV. It was undoubtedly a huge scientific breakthrough, but some people thought the news was overblown. They thought that it wouldn't have a big practical impact. They point to the fact that HIV has multiple strains and the cure was only applicable to one of the strains. They also point to the way the cure was administered, a bone marrow transplant, not exactly a practical solution for the people living with HIV. It's Monday, so we're going to close the episode with a quote. This one comes from the year 1654, but it's as applicable today as it ever was, especially in the world of mobile devices and distractions. Here it is from the philosopher Blaise Pascal. All of humanity's problems stem from man's inability to sit quietly in a room alone. That's clever. So even in 1654, before smartphones, before electricity, this was true. What would happen to your mental health, do you think, if you could be more comfortable just sitting quietly alone? Not all day, but just for a bit to reflect. I bet I would be a little more relaxed if I could do that some more. All of humanity's problems stem from man's inability to sit quietly in a room alone. And with that, we will close the program for the day. I love hearing from all of you, so if you'd like to get in touch with us, like Megumi did from Japan, you can send me a message on WhatsApp to +1 312 967 8757. Voice messages are welcome. You can say hi, sing a song, play an instrument, send a video, do a magic trick, whatever you like. I love hearing from all of you out there. And I always write back. Some people are surprised by that. +1 312 967 8757. Remember that we'll be back again on Thursday for another exciting episode of Plain English. See you all then.